conversation with one of my friends at the hospital about weddings. And I commented in an offhanded sort of way that in my whole life, so far as weddings go, I've been the groom once, and the officiant more times than I can count. But I've never been the best man. I've never been one of the groomsmen. Groom, officiant. That's it. So my brother gives me a call, and he says, "Guess what? We're getting married. And I'd like you to officiate." Darn it. I need to find another brother. Well, let me tell you a little bit about the brother I've got. He's younger than I am by 2 years, and he is also a minister. Now, unlike me, he never managed to quite defect from the Southern Baptists. So he's been down there in Southern Virginia serving a Baptist congregation while I've been up here in Yankee Land. Yes, that's how he thinks of it. The North. Capital T, capital M. But he has, since his divorce a good many years ago, found a relationship with a woman named Christina. And Christina is perfect in so many ways, but she has one major failing. Not only does she live clear across the continent, she also lives north of the border. Yes, Christina is from British Columbia. And that's been a challenge for my brother and Christina as they've been back and forth and back and trying to see each other and make sure they have time together, while each one of them is dealing with the raising of their own families. And you're thinking, Paul, shut up about this. I know, you're not even going to the wedding. But they've been working this out for ages, trying to find a time when my brother can move across the continent. And just this last week, he got a job offer. And everything fell into place. And so he called me up and he said, "Paul, can you come down this weekend?" And I want to tell you about 3 heroes in my life. Sherry Sullivan, Stan Ford, and my good friend Steve, who have each in their own way made it possible for me to not be here next week. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But there's something about that moment when things just happen. You can plan, you can think, oh, well, one of these days we're going to have a wedding. But when all the pieces fall into place, things happen quickly. There's that promise of things to come and that moment when they happen. That's what Jeremiah was talking about when he was talking to the exiles living in Babylon. They had been hoping for that day, for that time when everything would be right, when they could finally go home. And Jeremiah, he told them that time is at hand. It's here. God is doing a marvelous thing among you. The days are surely coming, he says, and are not far off, when God will raise up a righteous branch from the house of David, when the people will return home to Jerusalem, when Judah will be saved, and the people of Jerusalem will live in safety. It was a word of hope coming at the tail end of Jeremiah's long lament. But the time was there. Get ready. It's sooner than later. The psalmist, too, addressed that concern, that hope, that dream of God vindicating him. We assume it was a him. Sadly, ladies, it was mostly guys who did the right thing. There's some bias in there. You find it as you read through. But in this particular psalm, the psalmist is talking about enemies surrounding. Is talking about the need for God's vindication. And envision a day when God will change everything all at once. That's how change so often comes, all at once. We find that throughout the Scriptures, in both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, and even that period that falls between the two, that there's a hope for God to do something new, to transform things all at once. And throughout Scripture, when this happens, it's always at a time when God's people are under somebody else's boot heel. At a time when just standing up and speaking the truth out loud can land people in deep trouble. Thrown in prison, tossed into a fiery furnace, thrown to the lions. Again and again it happens, and again God's people respond by speaking in code. You know, there's always that in-group language that we understand that outsiders don't. And so, throughout Scripture, apocalyptic language became the code that God's people used. Coded language that talked about the signs in the heavens, that sometimes talked about dragons, that talked about a beast with 7 heads and 7 horns. And of course, the people who knew what was being talked about knew exactly what was going on, while the outsiders scratched their heads. And so we find in Luke's gospel, Jesus talking to his followers and using some of this apocalyptic imagery, talking about signs in the sun and the moon and the stars. Sadly, large portions of the Church of Jesus Christ have forgotten what apocalyptic literature is. And so Christians sometimes will read these passages and they'll go up and they'll look at the sun and the moon and the stars and they'll say, okay, you better start shaking. Now. But what we find, particularly in Jesus' words, as he is living in Jerusalem under Roman occupation, are words about the coming struggle, about what's going to happen, that we know from history to have taken place in the year 70. That's just plain old 70. When the Romans came in and destroyed Jerusalem and tore down the temple. We find this coming up as he talks about the sun and the moon and the stars and blood and fire and smoky mist and all of these things. And so what Jesus is telling his followers is to be ready, to pay attention, to know what's going on around you. Not because 2,000, 3,000 years in the future something's going to happen, but because there's something already fermenting. God is about to do a new thing. And so we show this image coming back again and again, echoing the book of Daniel, of the Son of Man coming in a cloud to rescue the people. Daniel, by the way, was written at one of those time periods when it wasn't the Romans, it was the Greeks at the time, when they had conquered Israel, when they had cleared out the temple, and instead of worshiping God there, had used it to house pigs. When they had banned the worship of Israel's God. Daniel wrote of a heavenly warrior coming to rescue the people. one like the Son of Man coming in the clouds. It's right there, Daniel 7:13, if you want to take a peek. It's the exact same image that Jesus uses. For the Hebrew people, there wasn't a heavenly warrior who showed up out of the clouds. It wasn't the archangel with a flaming sword come to chase off the birds. But it was one from among the people, Judas Maccabeus, who along with his brothers, who conquered the Greeks, who cleansed the temple. That's the story of Hanukkah, that our Jewish sisters and brothers celebrate starting at sundown tonight. That rising up of the people, cleansing the temple, and the miracle of the oil, that though it should have given out after just one day, burned for 8. A great miracle happened there. And it's a miracle that keeps happening. It happens again and again and again. In the Babylonian Empire, when Jeremiah stands up and offers a word of hope, under the heel of the Greek invaders, when Judas Maccabeus stood up, under the Romans, when Jesus stood up and offered a vision of a new future, the day to come, when God's reign will be known among us, when justice will be done. It's a truth that comes to us even today. As we live in our own empire here, when force is what accomplishes things rather than love. And so we, like Judas Maccabeus, are called to rise up to do our part to transform the system to build justice. Jesus told his followers back in the first century, look at the fig tree and all of the trees. As soon as they sprout leaves, you can see for yourselves that summer is near. So also, when you see these things taking place, you know that the kingdom of God is near. That's where we are in this season of Advent. In this place where we look around us and we see the signs, we see hope, we see joy, we see green buds and shoots, we see things in ferment. And in that, we know that God is present, ready to do a new thing in our midst. What is the thing that God is calling you to do? What is the way that God is inviting you to make a difference in the world? This weekend, we're remembering the late President George H.W. Bush. And we recall his 1,000 points of light idea, where normal people, just like you and me, can make a difference in the world. An act of kindness, a new program, reaching out to teach a child, going to visit a prisoner. 1,000 points of light? Not a bad idea. But it's only a piece. I think we need a lot more than 1,000. I think each one of us is called to be a point of light. A place where God's light breaks into the world. A place where Advent takes one step closer to Christmas. May we then let our lives and our lights shine as we look around us and we find the leaves sprout with hope. Amen.